I'm Andrew Burton. I'm a professor of fine art here at Newcastle University, where I've taught for longer than perhaps I would care to remember. I was a student here, and then after a couple of breaks, I've stayed on. I've been teaching here for a long time, mostly in sculpture, quite a lot in ceramics too. I've been working in clay for probably 40 years. I started out modeling animals, really, and then I got into making pieces in clay which were fired. So often I use quite coarse kind of clay because I work quite quickly, work quite roughly. The pieces are often architectural on scale, so I'll get bags of clay and then chop big chunks up really and whack them together. And then about 10 years ago, I got into working with these very small bricks, which I make by extruding long bars of clay and then slicing those up with a kind of machine that looks like some sort of aggressive guillotine or something like that, making thousands and thousands of tiny bricks, which the purpose of that really was to get into thinking about the relationship between architecture and clay and the whole world of building and ceramics. I use lots of different kinds of clay. It depends what kind of sculpture I'm making. For the most part, I use clay that has got a kind of architectural body on. It's what's called heavily grogged, and that means it's got lots of bits of already fired clay in it, so it's quite small shrinkage. But for other pieces, for the brick pieces, I just use any old clay that comes to hand, really. It could be recycled clay, it could even be stuff that I've kind of found, in old bags, and basically soak it down until it's ready to use and then turn it into the bricks. I have lots of different making processes. So in a way it's changed, and it's something that's continually evolving. Sometimes it responds to issues around sustainability, like sometimes I don't even fire the clay and it'll just be kind of unfired pieces. Sometimes it's to do with sustainability in the sense of what can be afforded, what's a cheap clay body to use. Sometimes it's sustainability in the sense of what's actually going to last a long time out in the environment, because quite a lot of my sculptures go outside, so they have to be strong. I've been making these little tiny clay bricks. Each one's about the size of a Lego brick. They're made out of any kind of clay that comes to hand using this kind of strange machine. And I turn those bricks into sculptures. But when the sculpture's finished, unless it gets sold or something like that, basically I break it up at the end of exhibition and I'm left with a whole load of the original bricks. And so I'll reform those into another sculpture, and so on and so on. But each time I make a sculpture, I might paint it or glaze it or color it in some way or treat the surface in some way. So when I break it up, there'll be a kind of residue of the original piece or the sequence of pieces that those bricks have been in. The forms tend to be very simple. They tend to be architectural. Sometimes they're like towers or buildings or monuments or, things that also have got a kind of both a sense of being built up, but also of collapsing over time. I like that kind of tension between things that are being built and things that are falling apart. Sometimes I make vessels. I've been into the kind of vessel form for quite a long time now, so I explore different kinds of vessel forms. The concept of sustainability has always been there in the brick pieces, because you're using the same clay, the same fired clay, through a sequence of different pieces. So in a sense, you're not remaking the piece, refiring it, remaking it, refiring it. So the firing got done once, and then the pieces are being used and reused and reused and reused. It's definitely becoming more of an issue. I mean, people are obviously thinking about it more and more. Clay is quite a difficult material to kind of think about in truly sustainable terms, because it is by its very nature extractive. It's something that's being dug out of the earth, and that's a limited resource, and the kind of processes that it has to go through, being fired at very high temperature, perhaps being glazed, all of those are environmentally problematic. But certainly artists are kind of thinking about that. They might be using glazes that are less toxic. They might be trying to use clay that is closer to hand, so it doesn't have to be transported so far. They might even be making work that doesn't get fired.